my friends, this is Katie from HollabackPurl, and today we're going to talk about the Sentro knitting machine and how to use it. So let's get going. Before we begin, we're going to talk about the parts of the machine here. If you touch the machine, you're going to have legs on the bottom, and if you bring your hand from the table up the leg of the machine and you glide your hand around the machine, eventually you are going to come to this long stick like feeling thing that is actually a tension holder, and in the tension holder you're gonna feel these spaces that have holes in them, and that is what you are actually going to be placing the yarn into. It does wiggle vertically, it does not wiggle horizontally very much. It is supposed to go vertical though. If you glide your hand along that tension holder and into the machine, you can feel the machine, and you glide vertically up the machine, eventually you are going to come to a pyramid type shape. And in the pyramid you're going to feel like a circle that has a line shaped gap that brings you all the way to the top of that pyramid shape. On the other side of the pyramid shape are your pins that we are going to be placing yarn into. All right, so we are going to we have the tension holder in the bottom, we are gliding up, we're going to call that part that you are going to put the yarn into that is in front of the pin, we're going to call it the pyramid, and then we have the pins. So our yarn is going to go from the tension holder up into that gap of the pyramid and into the pins, and we're going to go over how to do that in a minute. So from this pyramid shape, if you glide your hand to the left of the machine, you are going to come to a rectangular shape. And on top of that rectangular shape, there is a button. It is a black button, and when you push it, it'll actually reset the row counter. So beside that black button, there is another rectangle shape that has the number in it. That is how many rows you have created for your piece that you're working on. And the cool thing about this is if you reset to zeros, every single time you crank the machine to a new row, it is going to click. So you can hear exactly how many clicks, which equals a row for your hat or your scarf or whatever you're making. So for instance, we are creating a hat that's an adult size. We're going to do 140 rows. So every time you click, that'll be 140 clicks, and then we know that your hat is completed. All right, so take your hand, glide it to the right. You're going to come to that pyramid shape, continue to the right of the machine, and eventually on the side of the machine you will actually feel a button. And this button, if it is flipped up, then that is, sorry, why isn't it working? Okay, if it is flipped up, it is on panel setting, and if it is flipped down, it is on tube setting. So flipping up for panel setting, that is for scarves, blankets, even sweaters. I've actually made slippers out of that. If you flip down to tube setting, that is for hats. You can also make slippers out of it as well, or sleeves for a sweater. So those are your settings you're going to have on your machine. If you continue going right away from the tube and panel button, you are going to continue moving around the machine towards the right, and you're going to come to this cranking arm. And as you crank it, counterclockwise or clockwise, you can hear the pins of the machine moving up and down, grabbing the yarn. That is how we're going to actually create the knitting product on this machine. We are going to continue to crank the arm counterclockwise or clockwise, whichever way you are going to decide to go. Perfect, those are the parts of our machine. All right, friends, so let's talk about what we need in order to create a hat on this knitting machine. You're going to need some yarn. You are also going to need a pair of scissors, and the knitting machine does come with plastic tapestry needles. They feel like very large sewing needles, and we are going to need one of those. The type of yarn that I like to use for my hats, you can get at any hobby store or Walmart, and it is absolutely fantastic. So it is a Lion brand mandala ombre yarn. This one, if you look on the side of the yarn, it'll actually say that it is a size 4, and it is a very soft yarn. It is very comfortable. very forgiving, and I rarely have any issues with it on the machine. Plus it comes in really cool colors. So that is all that we're gonna need. Now that we know the parts of our machine, we are gonna have to prepare the yarn to work with. This particular yarn comes in a what's called a cake. It's a very similar shape to what a birthday cake may be. And in the top of the yarn cake, in the very, very center, you can reach into that hole and pull out the center bit of yarn. And sometimes it's a little tricky. You gotta give it a good yank. There you go. And it comes all the way out, and you're gonna have possibly a large bundle of yarn now. If that happens, it's okay. What I recommend is placing the yarn cake on the floor. That way it's not gonna roll away on you. If you are using a yarn ball, I recommend putting it into a bowl or even a coffee can, something that will make sure your yarn is not running away on you. All right, so now that we have this bundle in our hands for my yarn cake, I'm going to carefully unravel it, and I'm going to find the end of the yarn. So as I'm doing this, I'm making sure there's no knots, no tangles. I'm trying to make sure that as I drop the yarn around me on the floor, that it's not going to tangle up on me either, because if it does tangle up, that can be a nightmare, especially if you can't see where your yarn is. All right, carefully, whoop, my yarn fell. But I'm holding on to it so I know exactly where it's going. All right, keep stretching out my yarn. All right, we're almost there. And once you find the end of your yarn, this is where the fun is going to begin. Perfect. All right, so to begin this, remember we need to have our white pin in front of our pyramid shape. And so in order to do that, we're gonna bring our hand towards the right of the pyramid to this button, and we're gonna flip it up to panel. We are going to crank our hand crank in the counterclockwise position until it stops. When that happens, that means your white peg is in front of your pyramid shape, and that is perfect. As soon as you know that your machine has stopped, you have the white peg in front, you are going to put your hand back onto the button, flip it down to the tube setting, because we are going to be making a hat. Now we have the end of our yarn in our hand, and if you are using the Lion brand Mandala Ombre yarn, you can put this yarn specifically in that first outermost tension holder ring. So when you have your hand on the tension holder, the line closest to the machine is too tight. The one in the middle is a little less tight, but the one on the end is the one that we are going to be using. So you're going to use the tension ring that is closest to your body if you are standing in front of the tension holder. You're going to bring your hand up the machine to that pyramid shape. You're going to have the end of the yarn in your right hand. You're going to glide it up to that pyramid shape as well. Where that pyramid shape in the top has that gap, that like trench, that's what you're going to put the yarn into. So you're going to slide your hand over it with the yarn going inside that trench shape. Bring your right hand with that end of the yarn towards that middle portion of your machine, and you're going to bring it out probably like 1 or 2 hand lengths and drop the yarn into the center of the machine. That way your yarn isn't going to pop out of this tension holder. Now your yarn, you're going to want to make sure there's this pin, the white pin that is all the way extended vertically. You want to make sure that your yarn is to the right side of that pin. That would be towards your hand crank portion of the machine. So your yarn is towards that side. All right, now you can bring your hand back to the pyramid shape, your right hand on the pyramid shape. your left hand, you can glide down that yarn to the tension holder, and you can take it off the tension holder now. Don't worry, we're going to put it back there. We just needed that resting position, right? You can take your right hand and hold the yarn end that's resting inside your machine. You can hold it against your machine so it doesn't go anywhere. Bring your left hand with holding that yarn that is towards your body out of that trench and make sure it is to the left of that white pin, that very first pin. So now we know that the yarn is being grasped by that pin. All right, you're going to take your right hand to the crank now, and we are going to be cranking clockwise. As you crank, the pin to the left of the pin that is currently raised is going to come up. You're going to take your yarn, and as that pin comes into the vertical position, you're going to wrap the yarn to the back of the pin or towards the center of the machine. Okay? Bring it around and keep cranking till the next pin comes vertically, and you're going to put the yarn to the front of that pin. Continue to the next one, and it's going to go to the back. Again, continue cranking to the front and back, and you are going to keep bringing the yarn to the front of the pin or to the back of the pin as you're slowly cranking. So in front of the pin, in the back of the pin, in the front of the pin, into the back of the pin, and you're going to continue doing in this manner until you get back to your starting position. The way you know that it is your starting position is because you can take your right hand, periodically stop cranking, and you can feel towards the center of your machine, and you can feel where that yarn, that original yarn, is hanging towards the center. All right, so around front of the pin, back of the pin, and we're going to continue this, and slow and steady wins it, because if you mess up on this part, then it's going to set you up for failure as you continue. So you're going to want to really make sure that you have done this correctly. So when you get to that very first pin that has the end of your yarn, and you know that now you're ready to actually do your hat, just like continue cranking and knitting, you can take the yarn that is being held in your left hand, put it back into that trench of the pyramid. You're going to place it in there. Run your hand down to that tension holder again and put the yarn back into that hole that is closest to your body. As soon as you have done that, you are completely ready. You are set up for success to create a hat. In order to make an adult size of this hat, you need to crank 140 rows. If you want a child size, you want to crank 125 rows. Sorry about that. And if you want to create an infant size, you can create 75 rows. So we are set up for our hat. We can reset our counter if you haven't done it yet, because as it clicks, if you hear the click, you know that you have successfully created a row. So I'm going to put my right hand on the crankshaft, and I'm going to turn clockwise. And as it's doing that, you don't have to grab anything with your left hand. Your machine is going to do all of the work. You can hear each pin grabbing the yarn, and hopefully you're not going to get any drop stitches. If that does occur, we'll make a whole nother video on how to fix that. But right now, we're just practicing cranking. And with this specific yarn in the tension holder, you will usually have a successful hat and not worry about any drop stitches. Every once in a while, your yarn may get stuck in the tension holder. If that happens, you're going to stop cranking, take your left hand along your yarn to the tension holder, make sure there's not a knot in your yarn or anything, and make sure that the yarn on the floor is exactly where it's supposed to be. Maybe have a little excess yarn on the table by your yarn machine. That way, you're not going to have anything create pressure on your tension holder. If you make sure everything is good to go, take your right hand and continue cranking. All right. I am going to continue cranking so that you can hear exactly what the knitting machine is going to sound like with the counter clicking as well. Sometimes your machine may stop cranking, and if that occurs, glide your hand to the pyramid, bring it over to the pin that is vertical, and take your index finger from that vertical pin, bring it left towards the next pin that is about to go vertical. Sometimes you'll feel a piece of yarn that has gotten stuck on the very, very top of that pin. If that happens, just push it towards the center of the machine, so over that pin, and continue cranking. Quick little fix, huh? So you have finished your hat. What are you going to do next? You are going to take your hand, your left hand, to the tension holder in the front of your machine and pull the yarn off. Okay? So take the yarn out of the tension holder. You can then take it out of that pyramid shape as well. And take your right hand and glide it along the yarn towards your yarn ball. You're going to make sure you have probably an arm length of yarn. So I'm going to actually measure it along my arm, make sure I have an arm length, and then I'm going to take my scissors and carefully cut my yarn. So now I have this very long bit of yarn. Remember that tapestry needle that we got with our machine? We are going to take the end of this yarn and thread it through that needle. Boop. Okay, we have the yarn on the needle. We're ready to go. Take that whole long piece of yarn and bring it towards the center of the machine. Put it in the middle. Okay, perfect. Okay, so we have this yarn, and each time you crank the machine clockwise, your needle, your pin that is at that pyramid shape, you're going to crank it, the handle clockwise, and that needle is going to fall. And as it falls, you can feel that there is a trench also where that pin used to be. You can put your index finger of your left hand towards the center of the machine on the back of those two pins, creating that trench. Take the tapestry needle and glide it into the middle of that trench, and there is a piece of yarn there, this loop of yarn that you are going to put onto that tapestry needle and thread that needle through the loop. Perfect. And there you go. You have one stitch off of the machine. You are going to continue this all the way around all of these 48 stitches. So again, crank the machine, a pin is going to go all the way down. Take your tapestry needle and put it between that trench. Grab that loop of yarn, thread that needle, and again, boop, there's that piece of hat all off for you. All right, so let's continue doing that for all 48 of my stitches. All right, my dears, so we have a gigantic tube right now, right? On each end of the tube is a piece of yarn that is coming off of the edge. What you are going to do is on the inside of the tube, that is the side that we don't want people to see. But if you feel the outside of the tube, it's very smooth, it has this knit stitch, and that's what we do want people to see. You are going to take one end of your tube and you're going to stuff it inside the tube all the way to the opposite end, thus making your tube in half, okay? So grab your right hand, hold the edge of the tube. Your left hand is going to pinch the center of your tube, but just one layer, and you're going to shove your right hand into the tube where your left hand is. So shove, 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 and it's going to pop out opposite end of your tube. And you can take your left hand, bring it inside the opposite end of your tube so that you can grab both edges. Okay. You can take both hands to your fold on the center and make them kind of even. All right, so hold your tube where both of your edges that have the yarn string, you're going to take those two ends. All right, take your right hand and grab both of those yarn strings, and you're going to pull. Pull, 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 pull. Okay? You're going to want to make sure that both edges are pulled all the way closed. Okay? You're essentially just cinching up the hat. You're cinching up the edges just like a sack. And that is the top of your hat. Now these two pieces of yarn strings that you have in your hands here are extra long now, but what you're gonna do is you are going to double knot them. So just like you would tie your shoes, double knot and double knot again. Now you can cut off these two pieces of string. Let me make sure the inside is good. All right, so we're gonna cut off those two pieces of yarn. Okay, and there you have it. Let me take off this hat. You have your beanie. It's all done and cute, and you can roll up the cuff if you would like to have extra warmth around your ears. But there you go, my friends, you did it, and I'm so proud of you. I know it's been hard. If you have any questions, you can always ask me, but there you go. Oh, enjoy your hat. Have a beautiful day.